I unfortunately had to move back with my family after my most recent breakup. He and I were living in Boston together in an apartment we got. Just a little word of advice. Never sign a lease with someone who you recently got into a relationship with. He was not the person I thought he was. My parents live in Western Massachusetts. If you've ever been to Massachusetts, you know the more W you get, typically the more rural it gets. I'm not a big country girl. I like to be in or near a major city, especially since I'm in my 20s still. My parents' area is super boring. I'm hoping my stay here is only temporary until I can find an affordable apartment of my own. That said, I'll be avoiding Boston for reasons. In the meantime, I had to return to my old job at the urgent care facility I worked at before moving. They welcomed me back enthusiastically, even if it's just for a short while, until I relocate again. The downside to this job, however, is that I often get stuck with less desirable shifts, mainly overnights. While the work itself isn't difficult, it's mind-numbingly boring and completely throws off both my sleep schedule and social life. Not that my social life here is anything to brag about. After my shifts, I usually grab what I consider dinner, which typically means takeout, since not many places are open at that hour. This morning, though, I got off at 4 a.m. and stopped by a bagel shop that had just opened. They serve a variety of food, so I picked up a chicken sandwich and a salad, planning to eat once I got home. I also had to make a pit stop for gas as well. I stopped at the local Shell station, one of the few gas stations open at this hour, that was on the way home. The parking lot for this station is huge, and yet I hardly ever see any other cars in there, even during the day. I went inside to pay cash to save a little money. I went back outside to the pump, and there was now another car at one of the other pumps. It was a blue sedan. A guy got out of the car as I was walking over to the pump I was at. As I began fueling, I noticed him start to fuel up as well. I guess he locked the handle in place so that it would automatically keep dispensing gas without him holding it, because he walked through the two pumps to my side and then said to me, "Want to see a funny trick?" I immediately hated this interaction. Still, for some reason, I said, "What's the trick?" He then started doing that stupid old trick where you pretend you're pulling your finger off with your other hand by just folding it down. He kept looking down at his hands and then back at me with this kind of sarcastic-looking expression, as if he knew what he was doing was stupid. But honestly, I couldn't tell. I forced a fake laugh, hoping he'd take the hint and leave me alone. But he didn't. Even after I looked away and did my best to ignore him, he kept repeating the same trick. When I finally felt the gas nozzle click, signaling that my tank was full, I was relieved. I quickly put the nozzle back in place and rushed inside to grab my change. When I stepped back outside, I noticed the man was nowhere to be seen, yet his car was still there, and the pump was still running. Not wanting to risk drawing his attention again, I hurried to my car. Out of paranoia, I checked the back seat to make sure he wasn't hiding there. Satisfied, I locked my doors and pulled onto the road. Within 5 minutes, I was home, eager to dig into my 4:30 a.m. dinner. I grabbed the spare key from my parents' usual hiding spot, unlocked the door, and quickly put it back. Once inside, I locked the door behind me, as always, then headed straight to the kitchen to eat. I make sure to be quiet when I get home late, so as not to wake up my parents. We only have 2 cars in the family, so I share my mom's car. I didn't need a car in Boston anyway, But since I moved back, I had just been using the hidden spare key they would hide in the front to let myself in. As I was at the table eating, I heard the front door being unlocked and then opening and closing. I stopped chewing and froze to listen. With a mouthful of food, I said, "Mom? Dad?" No answer. I didn't hear any footsteps or anything. I hurried out of the kitchen to take a peek in the foyer. No one was in there. I felt like my heart was in my throat. I ran up the stairs to my parents' room and barged in. I was horrified to see both my parents in bed, and they were both awoken to my very forceful opening of the door. I said very quietly, but in a clear panic, that someone just came inside the house. My dad jumped out of bed and hurried downstairs. I cautiously followed behind him. He turned on all the lights of every room we passed. Then he went out front to check for the spare key, and it was missing. My mom and I were absolutely horrified, yet my mom still found the time to lecture me for not checking my surroundings before re-hiding the key. My dad began searching every room in the house, and we followed. When he was done checking my older brother's room, he left to continue searching and left the lights on in here. I stayed behind in this room and decided to check a couple of the spots that I felt my dad had missed, because I know internally I didn't expect to find anyone. I checked under the bed, and then I checked the closets. Nothing. So I went downstairs to the main floor. It seemed my dad was already checking the basement. I was honestly horrified to go into the basement right now, even with my dad down there. So I stayed on the middle floor with my mom. But curiosity still got me. And I went to the dining room, which is adjacent to the foyer by the front door. I got down on my knees and looked under the table, and there he was. It truly did not feel real. There was that man from the gas station hiding under the dining room table. I recognized him instantly. I screamed as loud as I could, and in response, my mom started to scream too. My 65-year-old dad came up the stairs as fast as he could, ready to fight this intruder. The man came out from under the table and began fending off my dad, who is at least 20 years his senior. And as my mom and I saw him overpowering my dad, we began doing whatever we could as well, hitting and punching at the man as my dad still held on to him. It was when all three of us were attacking him that he finally decided to retreat and fled through the front door. This was when we called the cops, and thank God for a quick response time. However, that man still had the key to the front door. That night, the police stationed a patrol car in our driveway to discourage the man from returning. My dad also wedged a chair against the front door and spent the night sleeping in the living room. The next morning, he replaced the front door lock, and from that point on, my parents stopped hiding a spare key outside. I can't shake the guilt of unknowingly leading that dangerous man to my parents' home. It was my own carelessness that put us at risk. But honestly, I have a strong feeling he followed me with his headlights off, since I hadn't noticed any cars behind me during the entire drive home. I'm beyond grateful that my family and I are safe. Still, this experience only made me more determined to move out as soon as possible. I enjoy driving at night because nothing frustrates me more than sitting in traffic. Being from Long Island, New York, I know firsthand how unbearable the congestion can be. My brother lives in Florida, and I make it a point to visit him frequently. But I won't lie, it's a long drive. Depending on when you leave, could be upwards of 18 hours. I like to leave New York very early in the morning, like 2 a.m. so that I could be out of all the high traffic areas by the time any cars are on the road. So it was a Thursday morning at 2 a.m. that I was leaving home to get on the road. I stopped for my morning coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, knowing I had a long, grueling drive ahead of me. The reason I was driving and not flying was because I was going to be down there for a whole month, and I didn't want to rely on my brother to take me everywhere I needed to go. By the time I had finally made it off Long Island, it was already past 3 a.m. Once I got through Jersey, the drive became much easier. Traveling from New York to Florida is simple once you're out of the city. You just follow I-95 straight down. Around 4 a.m., I started feeling hungry, so I took the first exit where I spotted a food sign. I noticed Wendy's was listed and decided to grab breakfast there. I had skipped breakfast at home since waking up that early usually means my brain doesn't register hunger for a few hours. At least, that's me personally. I followed the signs to the Wendy's. I was in some random spot in Jersey. There were no streetlights here. I felt like I was in the middle of nowhere. Just about the only light was from my headlights. When I got to the Wendy's parking lot, some of the lights were on, and I saw a car in the parking lot, so I pulled into the drive-thru. The menu in the drive-thru was lit up, so I thought it was open. But I sat there for over a minute, looking at the intercom, waiting for someone to greet me. But they didn't. I even said excuse me to no avail. I pulled out my phone and looked up this Wendy's, and wouldn't you know it, it didn't open until 6 a.m. And then suddenly 3 knocks at my window almost sent me out of my seat. I turned to my right, and there was a man outside my window smiling. He motioned for me to lower the window. I didn't really feel comfortable doing that, so I just cracked it open just enough to hear him. He said, "The place isn't open," and I said, "Yeah, I actually just found that out." He then told me that he was stranded. He pointed to the one other car in the parking lot over there and said his battery died. He practically begged me to come help him jumpstart his car. I told him I don't have jumper cables, and he told me not to worry. He has them in his trunk. I glanced once more at his car, parked in the corner spot near the woods, and thought to myself, I believe in karma. Leaving him stranded when I had the ability to help didn't sit right with me. He stepped back from his car to give me room to pull up beside him. Since he was parked head in, I did the same, aligning our hoods as closely as possible. After popping my hood, I got out of my car. He went to do the same, retrieving his jumper cables. Once we connected the cables to the correct terminals, I started my engine again. We waited a minute before I told him to give it a try. He took his time walking back inside, and when he turned the key, the engine didn't start. We let it sit for a couple more minutes before trying again. Still nothing. This was weird considering he had just been driving the car, so his battery shouldn't need that long to get enough of a charge to start again. The guy then asked me to hang on as he walked away and got on his phone. He started speaking in Spanish in a pretty low volume. I can't really understand Spanish, so I wasn't even bothering trying to hear what he was saying. He came back to me after his call and said that his friend said to give it a few more minutes and try one more time. I said, okay. I was trying to do the right thing, but I was also hoping this wasn't going to eat up much more of my time. But the last thing I was expecting was hearing the aggressive sound of 2 pickup truck engines flooring it into the parking lot, one from either side of the building. I instantly put it together. I said, "Oh shit," under my breath as I removed the jumper cables from my battery and shut the hood in a hurry. But it was too late. The two trucks pulled up behind my car, trapping me in. I had to think on my feet. I looked at the man, who was still smiling at me, but now the smile looked and felt much more nefarious and evil. The look he gave me was so unsettling, and it's engraved into my memory. I locked my car with my key fob and darted into the woods. I ran in the dark, cutting up my shins, and God knows what. I tripped over something on the ground, and at that point, I took that as the time to lay down and make myself as tiny as possible. I heard a few men yelling in Spanish somewhere in the woods. I was so scared for my life as the voices got closer. I don't think it gets any more tense than what I was experiencing in that moment. I didn't know how many there were. I didn't know if they were armed. But I heard at least 3 voices. Then the voices started fading away, back into the distance, and I felt a sense of relief, until the sound of my car alarm going off in the distance. All of my stuff was packed in the back of my car. Hundreds of dollars worth of clothes, shoes, watches, bracelets. I started making my way back to the parking lot, crouching down. By the time I got close enough to look into the lot, I could see it was just my car there. All 3 other vehicles were gone. I ran out to my car, and it was anyone's worst nightmare. My rear window was shattered, and all of my stuff was gone. Basically, 80% of my entire wardrobe just stolen. My suitcase in the trunk, and all the bags in the back seats. Everything. Tears of pure frustration welled up in my eyes as I dialed the police and explained everything. The officers on the scene informed me that they'd need to obtain the CCTV footage from Wendy's once it opened. After collecting all of my information, they reassured me that I didn't need to stay in town and that they would follow up with me. I was about 2 hours from home, so I turned around and began the long drive back. It was, without a doubt, the most stressful, disheartening, and utterly defeating drive of my life. To make matters worse, I later received a call from the police department in Jersey. They informed me that the car left in the Wendy's parking lot had fake plates, and neither of the 2 pickup trucks had any plates at all. The officer assured me that they were still investigating, but I knew he was just trying to give me a sliver of hope. My belongings were never recovered. Those bastards got away with it. Like I said, I believe in karma, and I can only hope that those pieces of filth eventually got what they deserved. But first, did you know that 98% of people who watch my videos aren't subscribed? That means you. And yes, I am speaking specifically to you. Probably aren't. So now would be a great time to leave a like on the video and subscribe. Anyhow, we've all taken a long car trip, haven't we? We've all passed that rest area sign multiple times, wondering if we could make it another 20 minutes or not before having to take a pee break or stretch. Sometimes you're lucky and get one of those huge rest areas with the big buildings with food and everything, but most other times, depending on where you are, you'll be lucky to get a little one with a tiny building just for restrooms and nothing else. Well, I was on a long road trip, a 15-hour road trip actually, and a big chunk of that drive was overnight. I won't say from where to where, because I don't really think that matters much, but I will say that I was in some bumpy area on the east coast of the U.S. It was late at night, and I was powering through the drive. Not many cars on the road at this hour. In fact, it was a pretty rare scene to see another car on the road this late. I was reaching that uncomfortable point in the ride where I had to use the bathroom, and I was just getting overall antsy in my seat from sitting for so long. I started keeping an eye out for a rest area sign, and when I saw that familiar blue sign, it felt like a saving grace. So a few miles later, I veered off into the rest area. It was a small one, but there was a restroom building, and that's all I needed. There were no trucks parked here. I'm pretty sure they could only stay overnight at designated truck rest areas. But there was another car in the parking lot. I considered the possibility that whoever it was asleep in their car. As I got out from my car, I stretched a bit, and on my way to the bathroom, I looked at the other car in the lot, but the windows appeared to be tinted, so I couldn't see if someone was inside of it or not. Not that it was a big deal in the moment. I was just curious. I got inside the bathroom, and I was faced with a strange sight. There was a man standing in the corner of the bathroom with his head looking down and his back towards me. At first I thought he was using the urinal, but I quickly realized he wasn't even facing the closest urinal. He was literally just facing the corner of the wall. I paused, and I didn't know whether to say something or not. I almost said, "Are you all right?" But the scene was just too weird. I had to walk closer to him, though, to get to the stall. And honestly, I was almost scared to get near him. I just tried to mind my business and keep a normal pace. I walked into the stall and closed the door. Honestly, though, I couldn't go to the bathroom with someone else in the room. I'm one of those people. He was just too dead silent in there. It was weird. I stood in the stall for like a minute, trying to at least pee, but I couldn't for some reason. I flushed the toilet anyway and left the stall, but now the man had turned around. He was still standing in the same spot, but now he was facing me. I could see his face, and he was looking at me. I'm not one to ever judge someone's appearance, but this man was the scariest looking man I'd ever seen. There was something so unsettling about his face, specifically his eye region. The expression he had was a blank stare. I hadn't had a social interaction in over 10 hours, and this caught me way off guard. Instead of saying anything, I quickly turned and headed out of the bathroom. I got to my car and wasted no time turning it on and backing it up. As I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw that man walking in the direction of my car. I drove fast away to get him out of my sight. I was relieved to get back on the highway. However, that was the only relief I got. I still had to use the bathroom. I was sure it would only be another 20 minutes or so till the next one. I could hold it. I was right. It was about 20 minutes before I got to the next rest area. It was another nearly identical one as the other. Like I said earlier, most are pretty similar. No cars were in this one, thank God. I pulled into a spot right in front of the bathroom and hurried to the stall. And let's just say, I felt a lot better very quickly. As I was finishing up in the stall, I heard footsteps enter the room. I thought they'd stop at one of the urinals, but the footsteps came straight to the stall and stopped. I saw someone's shoes through the bottom crack of the door. They were literally standing on the other side of the stall. My first thought was that it was that guy from the other bathroom. He followed me. My social anxiety was handicapping me from saying anything initially, until I finally mustered up the courage to say someone's in here. No response to this, though. Now I knew I was in trouble. The only thing I could do was dial 911, put it on speaker, so that the man could hear the operator say, "911, what's your emergency?" I said loud and clear. "I'm being followed by a dangerous man. I feel threatened." As the operator asked my location and details, I answered everything in a loud voice, in a tone suggesting that I was implying a "fuck you" to the man. Thank God this worked, as the person turned and walked out of the bathroom. I told this to the operator, but said I still would feel safer waiting in here until police came. And that's what I did. A knock at the bathroom door from a police officer was my cue to safely come out. I described the man and the vehicle I saw at the other rest area, the creepy encounter, and then the second creepy encounter at this one. We checked my car as well to make sure it wasn't messed with at all. After determining that he was gone, the officer and I left the rest area at the same time. And eventually, he turned off the highway. The rest of my road trip went normal, but damn, was this a terrifying night. I'd never been followed before. I know with almost 100% certainty that the person outside of the stall was the same creep that was in the first bathroom. It just feels extra weird because I'm a male. These things I feel like usually seem to happen to women, but I guess it can really happen to anyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more amazing video. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. Alright, that's it for today. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.